because this isn't a podcast, how are we supposed to start things off?
Theme tune would be good.
Any particular tune you're looking for?
I'll compose it and send it over.
Excellent. No copyright, please. Public domain only. Someone asked ChatGPT, what's the best way to intro a podcast, right? But look, to kick things off, why don't you just, for the audience, introduce yourself?
I am Sam Allison.
My name's Dipak.
So when we get into that initial conversation and we're talking to people around what direction of travel they're going in, often I find that CISOs, people in the world of cybersecurity, have a lot of toys. You know, what they like, they've got a collection of tools which they sit there and maybe they're not quite making sense over what is doing what they're getting value from, and trying to understand what is their priority and what are they actually trying to avoid from happening.
So they're playing in Aladdin's clay. It's a fun fair for them, right?
Of course.
And that is not diminishing the passion of these security operations people,
not at
right?
all.
If anything, they're doing the best they can with the things they've been provided by the businesses that probably, as much as they're aware of it, they still haven't understood it completely at the board level. So give them a new, I mean, I certainly, every time a child screams, just give them a new toy.
Yeah.
You know, eventually there's loads of toys.
and by adding these new toys on, you hope that one of them is going to stop the problem from happening. But actually, do you really understand where the problem lies?
Yeah.
What are your priorities? Are you getting real value from all of these tools that you have? And I think those are mainly the conversations that we have, you know, around the architecture that CISOs see in front of them, and really trying to understand, are they solving the problem? If there was an attack, like how would they deal with that? What's the playbook for that? You know, is that standardized across the organization? Is, you know, someone collecting a security incident just on an email over here, which can be accessed by the whole organization? You know, how secure are you within your company? So those conversations often start from there, and there's varying degrees of maturity that we deal with organizations, whether it be a massive bank who is clearly very mature and has a lot of money to spend on security and risk, is very different to dealing with and very regulated as well. The regulator, if they weren't doing that, then they would be in trouble. Whereas we deal with some organizations and it's a very different conversation, where maybe you've got a couple of people working in cybersecurity, it's not a regulated industry, they might be managing it on a spreadsheet and they know that's probably not the right place to do it. They might have a couple of security scanners which are scanning, but they don't really know what the priorities are. There's a lot of false positives, a lot of information that doesn't need to be there. And they're kind of thinking, all I've got is a lot of noise, but where should I put my energy? Because every organization, whether you are a huge global bank or whether you're a small organization, has limited resources.
Yeah.
So what we're often talking about is, if you really need to prioritize things, what do you need to prioritize? And a lot of our conversation, a lot of our work at the moment is around creating that transparency within the organization to say, that's noise, that's not noise. If I were you, I'd definitely be looking at that.
Risk-based, proportionate against your resources and the threat or the opportunity it falls in, right?
Yeah.
And we won't touch too much, but I did want to question, like, you've got these financial institutes, you've got literally, I mean, they're not printing money, but they're certainly storing it.
Yeah.
They have a lot of legacy systems. They rely on older practices and new practice, and also the difference between highly regulated, so like lots of third line eyes on them, to other industries where actually the minimum standard's just pretty minimum, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like what you have to do. So those same people are supposed to answer the same threat. What are the most negative things about financial institutions or large operations, and also the negative things around what are obstacles for those small companies as well when it comes to how to solve this? Because that's what you're here for, right? You're here to help them hear them,
of course,
and begin solving it.
The main, as I touched on previously, one of the main challenges that we find with those large organizations especially is just an inability to change. A lot of resistance to change, and we do a lot of work in not just financial services but public sector as well. That those big old institutions bringing in a new tool, and I can empathize with having recently moved from a Windows machine to a Mac. My Lord, did it become very clear to me. I understand why these people do not want to change. And suddenly when you've got hundreds of people who are all using a system, and then that system totally changes, that's a lot of change control that you need to put in place. That's a lot of knowledge transfer, that's a lot of training, that's a lot of coaching, that's a lot of selling internally to make this seem like a good route to go down. That is very challenging, very challenging. So I think those kind of things with the big organizations are definitely the main thing that we come up against. Also, processes within very large organizations that simply do not align. That you have different, whether it be finance and then technology and then HR, have all got totally different way of dealing with their processes and how they manage things. Bringing those people together to say this is our common process and then we're going to work like this, or whether it by country, and it might be that an organization has grown by acquisition, and actually they've got lots of different organizations within that company which all operate in their own way. Very, very challenging to deal with, very complex, and requires a lot of tact as you go through the projects and implementation of security solutions to help them. Is getting everyone on that same page is very, very hard. A colleague of mine gave me a good story that he was going into a large public sector organisation, which is very, very spread out. This was many years ago across lots of different areas. I won't say which one, but you might be able to guess that it's not a very centralised organisation. And he went in to speak to the CIO about their process and walked into the room and 70 people were sat there. So when you have 70 CIOs that all want the way that they want to operate and they think they are right, it's very difficult to make any real progress unless you've got one person saying this is the direction of travel, this is what we're going to do. So I think for those big organizations, those are some of the main challenges that we come up against, among other things, competing interests, understanding what platform you should be on or should be managing things, understanding who owns what and who is responsible for what, even just the politics around who is configuring or developing what within the organization, who should be taking responsibility for it, plus who should be paying for these things. Nothing in these big transformation projects is cheap, and it's around understanding where that budget is going to come from in order to pay it. One of our large clients, the main stakeholder there, when we talk about the project that we've been doing with them for the last 3 years, and we talk about how they found that money to do this big transformation project, he's had long conversations with me around where he said, he's been working on this project for the last 10 years and building up enough money to be able to do that and stopping other things from happening. Because I think within a big organization, you often find that small pockets of projects might be happening all over the place, but there's no cohesive thinking around what direction we're traveling in. Which, when you have lots of silos working like that, actually it's not very productive and probably a bit of a waste of money as you go through, because you're never going to get to a position where things all talk to each other. And he spent the first 5 years of the project just stopping other things from happening, to get people on that same page, to ensure that the money can be put into one area and really create change within an organization. Because you need everyone on the same page, you need that cohesive thinking. So I think some of those things within the big organizations absolutely exist. The small organizations, money is always a big factor, and finding the right level of investment to do it is difficult. But on the positives of that, whereas the big organizations often have the money, it's just where that money is spent and how it's spent. The smaller organizations, finding the money can be difficult, can be really challenging, but actually what you find is with smaller groups of people, they're often more open to change. And that organizational change management piece is a lot simpler. There's not as much that you need to do because the teams just simply are not that big. And you often find that the people working within those, in the particular, whether it's security, that they're fed up with using the solutions that they've already got. And that's, often clients, you say, have you considered OCM? And they say, well, we don't need OCM because everyone hates the tool we're on. It's like, well, that's not really understanding. You've still got to teach people in order to get them onto something new and coax them and sell that new solution to them. With smaller organizations, you find that can be often much easier because the people who are going to be using the tool are often involved in the project.
So that they're connected directly to the effect. I mean, look, every change is about, do people feel that they're part of the change or just getting in the way of the change, right?
Yeah.
So those larger organizations, I think it's interesting to get your perspective on what connects the same thing. A culture seems to be it. Whether you're really big and it's so big that change is an investment, or you're small and then if you get past the hurdle of the investment, they've all got to have an objective and a direction, right? There's got to be a single accountable person in amongst all of that. You can't forever plug all the leaks until you realise the whole building's made on lead pipes.
Yep.
So the leaks are going to keep coming. So we need to do a holistic change overall and do something dramatic. But where does somebody go to begin to change the overall direction of an entire business? Because a lot of them are just continuing to firefight. Mm-hmm. Or if you take the positive, they're just continuing to deliver what they deliver.
Yep.
In the meantime, everything you described about people doing mini projects, doing what they think is right, it's just a smorgasbord for the cyber actors to go, well, I'll nip that in the bud, I'll have a bit from there.
So many vulnerabilities when you're running an organization like that, where you don't really have a view over where the vulnerabilities lie. I think, where does someone start when they're doing a large transformation project? From the clients that we've dealt with, it starts usually, it's got to be from the top.
Is that where you direct, whatever the conversation is, whoever it is, do you want to dig in and find out before they start solutionizing? There's no point you coming to a car showroom assuming you need to buy a car. It may well be you need a bus pass.
Yeah, indeed. I think you've got to have passionate individuals underneath those people at the top that have got the people at the top's backing.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It did. You're tired.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So you need to have people that really want to change.
Okay.
And that are quite happy to get the bruises through the project.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's not an easy game to play. You know, it's much easier to remain the same and do the same, as we find in our everyday lives. Sometimes,
but then you'll get used to those bruises because
you get used to those.
You're
bruises.
numb to them, aren't you?
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think you need change to be absolutely sanctioned by the top, and you need the top to realise that there's something wrong. And then you need individuals underneath those people to have the passion and the drive to push these projects through, because I don't think anyone at the beginning of these large transformation projects really understands how complex it's going to be as we move through them. Especially on those big transformation projects where there's multiple business lines involved, you need relationships between those people to be positive, and there to be agreement in general about the direction of travel that they're going in. Otherwise, it is hard work.
What is that hard work? I mean, I started thinking like, well, so do you just stand back and watch the fire burn, or do you wait for the two kangaroos to beat each other until one of them's won? How much influence can you have on that with all the expertise and experience you've got?
Well, I think you can be that. I was just dealing with one today, which has been. We're getting to the point where there's just no cohesion in the project between the different business lines.
Right, so they've got, I'm assuming that it's a standard, they've got loads of verticals all trying to solve something that's overarching across the whole business.
Correct.
And they just cannot they can't even agree on what is A, B or C.
Yeah,
okay.
And they just can't align their internal process. And it's compounded by the fact that the people who are involved in the project don't report into the same person. So they report into completely different reporting lines across the business, and that is very hard because there's no one person to say, you know what, I hear you, but unfortunately we're going to move in this direction.
You've got 6 people pulling on one end of the rope.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what I can be in that situation is I can listen, understand where the issues lie, and then understand what we need to do as an organisation to put the right people in front of them to create a solution which is going to bring the right outcome. And a lot of that is having the right expertise in the room, people that have done it God knows how many times before, to guide them through that process. I also, I'm a people person, that's what I am, to create relationships for that client in particular. And actually, I've just introduced them to another client of ours to say, why don't you talk to these people that have been through this before? They're in big old organization that's very complicated. People are very resistant to change, and get the clients to speak to each other about what best practice looks like. And, maybe shed a few tears about how difficult it's been throughout the process. But the client that I've put them in touch with, they've been through it. They've come out the other side, and yet still on that journey, but they can certainly tell some war stories about what's happened during that process. So I think anything like that, often I find that when I talk to clients who are really at their wits' end, they feel like the project just can't progress in the way that they want it to progress. It's about allowing them to A, have someone to offload to, and B, me being that signpost to say, well, actually, you want to speak to X, Y, and Z about X, Y, and Z because they're going to guide you in the right direction. So I think that's what I can be in the project.
A teacher and a mentor without the drama. I mean, you set your own analogy up there, isn't it? But then part of that is that if businesses are resistant to change, it's not that they don't want the change, it's just that they don't know how, right?
Business is resistant to change, but unfortunately, I think over the next 5 years, there's going to be so much change that, and if you're not on the boat, you really are going to be left at the harbour. Like it's changing phenomenally. And what I've seen, speaking to clients a year ago, their investment in AI was minimal. They just a lot of them just, we're not doing it because we don't understand it. And often those conversations around AI that came out just didn't really lead anywhere because people didn't know what this thing was, and people were maybe a little bit scared of it and a little bit scared about the risk that it can cause within an organization. At the same time, you've got people who are threatening to these organizations using AI liberally to try and attack them, to do much more complicated social engineering, to rather than it being one person in a call center in whichever country around the world ringing you up and asking for your password, they've got lots of different bots which are all different kind of agents doing strange things within the organization to try and get that vulnerability, that weakness, to get in there. That's a real issue. And we've seen those attacks get greater and greater and greater over the last 18 months. To a much with much greater effect as well within the organization. What I've seen as we've come to the end of 2025 is that now our clients are investing. And this kind of concept, and I don't want to predict that something won't happen, this idea that I think there's an AI bubble, I'm not sure there is. I think that we're going to see such huge investment in AI from organizations moving into 2026 that I think it will be shocking. So as we see our organizations that we work with investing in AI so heavily, this change is coming. And within the organization, if what we're seeing, and the companies are spending X million on AI agents and AI across the organizations in multiple different tools, people are going to have to get used to change very quickly. Otherwise, I think you will be left behind. And I think especially in the world of security and risk, this has to be at the forefront of what we're doing here, about how we are managing that AI within organizations, how we are governing it, how we are looking at how individuals are using it, that what we don't have is a load of shadow IT where people are using their own AI agents for certain things, ChatGPT on the side, which I think we're all guilty of at times, that you're copying and pasting information and putting it into there where you don't really know where it's going. I think this whole industry is going to change. I think the whole world is going to change significantly. And if you're not an organization thinking about that change right now and thinking about how you're going to manage it, you are going to be in a whole heap of trouble, I think, moving 2 years' time, if we look back.
So is that driven, I mean, if anyone's hearing it for the first time, you heard it from Sam, but is that driven from, so is that balance from, is it driven from fear, or is it driven from the fear that you won't be in the right place when everything hits? Because we wonder, we speak about businesses under threat a lot, which is why SecOps exists. But this is a brand new threat, right? It's unpoliceable. it technically is unpoliceable because it just keeps happening and no one's going to stop it.
Yeah.
It moves at the pace that technology exists. It's so well socially engineered that you're right when you mention, insurance companies will pay out this amount. Well, those people doing the attack know exactly how much you're prepared to pay out, so they're only going to ask for that right amount, okay? Yeah. And then on top of that, there's the fact that people will always be a weakness, that people will continue to not take it seriously, and therefore, as many people get ahead of the game, there's going to be those left behind, and they're the ones who are going to be just cannon fodder for it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if humanity's seen such a rapid evolution. I know they talk about industrialization, where blacksmiths suddenly became no longer blacksmiths, they became engineers of the tools, but this is way beyond that. The speed is incredible.
The speed is incredible, and I think I don't know how a lot of people will deal with that change. And I think, going back to the point that we were talking around the accountants going into a hospitality setting to learn new skills about being a bit more fluffy around the edges and those soft skills, I think that is where we're going to move to. And speaking to clients that we've worked with for many years, and we bring in tools that automate things, not AI, but automate things.
Yeah, so make the process quicker,
Yeah. And often what you find is that this kind of idea that we're going to go in there and we're going to automate a load of processes, and then that means we'll be able to get rid of headcount, often doesn't come true. What it does is make everything much more transparent, and it changes those people's work from where they were maybe looking after a load of vulnerability scanners previously, actually taking that data and putting it into one tool where you can see the priorities, what is actually a threat, what isn't a threat, and the tool is doing that work for you, and you can remediate those threats much quicker. You can, you're all working in one space. It's not a fragmented manual process that it was previously. Those people that were doing that very manual job before, which actually wasn't very accurate.
It's also boring.
Boring, really boring. Now we're doing much more interesting work. And they're looking at strategy, and they're looking at how to fix problems, and they're looking at how they can work more collaborative as a team to create solutions to the issues that are being brought up all the time much quicker. So I like to think that that will happen, that the advent of AI and that change that will come in will allow people to do much more interesting, much more valuable work. Writing a proposal now is clearly a lot easier than what it was previously.
Because you've made AI copies of yourself. I hear that. But I wanted to capture that as well before we come into a kind of wrap up and some final thoughts around you, is that from the control perspective, which is the world that I lived in, that's exactly the point. Can you free up your resources from doing the boring governance work? And there was an image, you may not be old enough to remember this, but before Microsoft created an Excel, there were entire office floors dedicated to a single number on a ledger being changed, and then recalculate all the variances. And then the Excel sheet came out, and every one of those people disappeared, but they weren't made redundant. They did the more interesting stuff.
Indeed.
Well, what happens with that number now? So we get away with the heavy lifting governance, step them into important assurance activities. So governance is AI, assurance remains human, the creative ideas as well. Wrapping this up, Sam, what's your key message around security operations and where it might be in 25 years' time? What needs to happen here and now for it to be where it needs to be in 25 years' time?
I think people need to look at how...
Maybe they don't need to look. What is it about people that needs to change now to make sure in 25 years' time we're not having this same conversation?
I think things are going to change within 25 years that is incomparable to our brain cannot comprehend the kind of change that's going to happen within 25 years.
Right.
I think the world of work will be entirely different. I think that humans will be much more, as you said, the kind of assurance people looking over how the machines are doing things on a day-to-day basis. That brings a huge amount of risk. That if we as human beings, whereas now we've got pretty tight hold over everything, are suddenly going to let a load of AI agents do our kind of work for us, and we are going to make sure that maybe they're not going to cause a problem as they do that. I think that obviously opens a whole question around how those machines that talk to each other, how do we govern those? And if a real security incident was to happen in there, how we stop that from happening. So there'll be AI agents that are doing that work for us, but also AI agents that are looking at the AI agents and making sure that they're not doing the wrong things as well. And then we will be sat on the top, kind of being this master of this universe that we create. I think that's probably might be where we're heading, which sounds pretty crazy, pretty crazy.
Dystopian.
But what I would like to think is, as we go through that people are not forgotten.
Yeah.
That actually we are kind to those people that are going to have their jobs massively disrupted by this. And I hope that it allows people to do much more interesting stuff. You know, I am dyslexic and find, you know, that whole written thing very difficult at times. I need to put a huge amount of focus into it. AI has transformed the way that I can now do my job. And it means that that I don't need to look over my email 4 times before I send it, because I have, you know.
And then still have 2 spelling mistakes.
Indeed,
I'm with you.
exactly.
I'm with you.
You know, whereas now, you know, you have a Grammarly that I use that sits over the top of it and says, "Oh, Sam, don't be an idiot. You know, do that instead." And I'd like to think that it will free people up to do much more creative, much more interesting things. But we need to bear in mind that people still are people.
People still have it. And I think if I try to capture that in a swallowable pill for me, it felt like we just need to get on this journey and not necessarily know where the end of it is.
Yeah.
But it's time to actually enjoy that journey, because we've got things that we can use out of it as well.
Indeed.
Been a pleasure, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.